The ACT Monologues. Trick or Treat by Nicole Duhamel. Performed by Kaye, Nicholson-Horn.
I never answered the dawn this night. To tell you the truth, I never really saw the appeal of it, dressing up in some silly costume and running around, demanding sweets from the neighbours. Even when I was a child, I preferred other pursuits. Now I do my best to avoid the whole thing. I suppose it would be different if the celebration showed any vestige of its roots. Even I have to admit that there's something interesting about the old tradition of All Hallows Eve, the night when the spirits of the unquiet dead are free to wander the earth. But no one seems to remember any of that these days. It's all about costumes and teenagers throwing eggs at my windows. No, I prefer to enjoy my own little ritual tonight. I lock the door, close the curtains, put on some music, dig out the family photo album and revisit some old memories. My very own ghosts from times gone by. When I was a child, my parents made this time of year so special. We'd go hunting, then we'd butcher whatever we caught together, prepare it and cook it. My family have always been hunters, and my parents were very keen for me to learn those skills as well. I picked up a lot about tracking, knots, and how to cook a good steak. Certainly more than I'd learned if they'd sent me to guides with the others. Ah yes, one of the first things my mother taught me to make was Irish stew. The right mix of vegetables, how long to cook the potatoes, how to get the meat just right so that it just melts in your mouth. It was an old recipe that her grandmother had passed down to her. She'd make it for me when I was ill and had to stay home from school. It wasn't quite what other children asked for, but I loved it. Then again, I never really was like other children. I must have been 12 or so at the time. We were on holiday. We'd go out to stay in our cottage in the woods every summer and spend the time fishing, hunting, hiking, anything we felt like. We caught the scent of our prey quite late in the day. The poor little creature had become separated from its herd. She'd fallen down into a dry riverbank and injured her leg, the poor little thing. I was much younger then. I asked my father if we could take her back with us and fix her up. She was so gentle and she had this lovely blonde pelt that was so soft when I reached out to stroke it. I would have liked to have had a little pet back then. But he told me that she wasn't meant to be a pet, and it would be kinder to put her out of her misery. So he did, and he carried what was left back to our cottage. He showed me how to drain a carcass of blood and how to bone and fillet it. I just watched, of course. He wouldn't let me use his butcher's knives back then. Then I helped my mother prepare the meat and add it to the stew. I think that day was the best it had ever tasted. As I got older, I learned more skills. When I was 16, my mother taught me to shoot. I started out aiming at old tin cans, but it didn't take too long before I moved on to small game. By the time I left school, I was on a shooting team. People said I could have gone on to do it professionally. I was really only interested in shooting because I could use it for hunting, though, so I didn't pursue it. My parents insisted that I go to college, so I had to restrict my hunting activities to summer holidays for a few more years. They made up for it, though, by teaching me some more advanced skills. They'd become interested in making sausages, spending time travelling in Europe to perfect the technique when I was away at college. The summer after I graduated, they celebrated by taking me with them to the villa they'd rented. They showed me what to do, taking me through each step of the process, and I was thrilled to finally be doing what I loved. But the real surprise came one night when they announced that they were going out for dinner. They also told me that I had free rein in the workroom, and they'd left me something to practice on. So I went down there, opened the door, and there was a fresh carcass hanging on one of the meat hooks. They'd even started draining the blood. I looked at it. It was a good specimen too, plenty of muscle. And I looked at the rack of butcher's knives on the wall, and I just couldn't help smiling. That was a good day. I made my first sausages, flavouring the meat with fresh herbs from the garden. They weren't the neatest I'd ever made, but they definitely tasted the best. Sausages are a thing people eat this time of year, aren't they? Everyone gathers around a bonfire, all bundled up, eating nice hot sausages washed down with cider. I wonder what they'd think if I offered them some of my lovely Italian sausages. maybe they'd like them. But then if they knew the secret, they'd probably be horrified. Would you like to know what it was? Those delicious sausages. The meat came from a hitchhiker that my parents came across. At least, I think he was a hitchhiker. They never told me exactly how they caught him. After all, who he was didn't matter. He was meat, prey, just like all the others. Me, my parents, my whole family have been hunting for decades now, and there's just so much prey out there for us. You know, I think I've got some sausages in the fridge. Not exactly the same, of course, but I use the same recipe. I've got enough to share. Do you think they'd like some?